On the day of this secret rendezvous, my unsuspecting husband left with a buoyant smile. "It's time to get moving," I said with resolve. "Hooray, we're moving to a new house, Mommy." With determination, I swiftly organized the move and reached out to the necessary contacts. As I prepared for this new chapter, I couldn't help but anticipate the reckoning for both my deceitful husband and my close friend who betrayed me. They were about to face the consequences of their actions, and I was ready to see them come to terms with their choices. My name is Mary, and I'm a 34-year-old part-time worker at a clothing store where I once worked full-time. I transitioned to part-time after marrying and becoming pregnant. My husband, Ben, is employed at a different company. Together, we have a 10-year-old daughter, Amy, who, though growing more reserved, is a generally cheerful and well-behaved child. As a devoted parent, I take great pride in her and cherish every moment we share. I met Ben during vocational school, and our relationship quickly blossomed. Even back then, he had a knack for spending recklessly. Whenever he received his part-time job paycheck, he'd impulsively splurge on pricey items like designer shoes or the latest gaming consoles, luxuries that strained our student budget. There were times when we subsisted on nothing but cereal for days. Despite this frustrating habit, Ben is genuinely kind-hearted and straightforward, which is why I've taken on the responsibility of managing our finances since we married. We closed Ben's account and now share mine. I always keep the passbook and debit card, giving Ben $200 as pocket money on payday. Naturally, I never got a credit card in his name. When I shared this with my best friend, Lottie, she burst into laughter. "You're incredible, managing everything so well." I need to address Ben's excessive spending. Lottie has been my best friend since high school, marking the longest friendship I've ever had. Although I was initially put off by her flashy style, I soon discovered we had much in common and enjoyed our conversations. While I found it hard to grasp her frequent changes in boyfriends, I've learned that no one is perfect. Her imperfections made it easy for us to speak candidly about anything. Even Lottie, with her free-spirited nature, settled down and became a devoted housewife 2 years ago. She acknowledges, maybe I'm a bit excessive with Ben. However, with more expenses on the horizon for Amy and our dream of owning a house, I feel the pressure. We currently live in a rented flat, which, while comfortable, pales in comparison to the dream of owning a home. Lottie's recent experience of building a new house only heightened my desire for one of our own. Despite the challenges, I focus on the long-term happiness of my family. That day, Ben came home later than usual. "Did you have to work overtime today?" I asked, noting that his overtime hours had dropped significantly recently due to the tough economic climate. "Yeah, it was unexpected. Sorry, I forgot to let you know," Ben replied. "Well, if that's the case, it can't be helped," I said, heading toward the kitchen to reheat dinner. Just then, Ben stopped me. "I already ate on my way back," he said. Given that Ben usually saves his pocket money and eats at home, unless there's a special occasion, I was taken aback. Noticing my surprise, he added with a smile, "I couldn't turn down an invitation from a colleague." "All right, but please make sure it's within your allowance," I said. "Of course," he replied before heading to the bathroom. From that day forward, Ben's overtime hours began to increase again, and he often ate out to avoid troubling the family with his late returns. While I appreciated his thoughtfulness, I couldn't shake my concern about whether his allowance would cover these extra expenses. I had mentioned before that he didn't need to report what he spent with his allowance, and Lottie had laughed at me for saying so. I didn't want to seem too strict, but Ben's frequent dining out made me worry about the impact on our food budget. While Ben was in the bath, I took the opportunity to check his coat pockets and found his wallet. I wanted to see how much money was left and if there were any receipts from his recent meals out. Normally, I'd ask him directly, but for some reason, I felt compelled to look myself. To my surprise, the $200 in his wallet was nearly untouched. This puzzled me. It seemed unlikely that he was always being treated to meals by colleagues or superiors, and if that were the case, he would have mentioned it. Since I hadn't packed him a lunch, he must have been paying for his own meals. With these questions swirling in my mind, I decided to check Ben's smartphone. He used a book-style cover that displayed a locked message when opened. On a hunch, I tried entering his birthday, and to my surprise, it unlocked. What I saw on the screen left me stunned. The chat application was filled with intimate messages between Ben and Lottie. It was clear that Ben had been using overtime as a cover for his meetings with Lottie, where they had been dining together. While I had initially thought Lottie might have been paying for their meals or dates, what shocked me even more was discovering that Ben was having an affair with her. When I introduced Lottie to Ben at our wedding, she seemed indifferent to him, particularly given his financial struggles. After Lottie got married, I had felt completely reassured, but now everything had changed. I was so shocked that I momentarily forgot to breathe, but I quickly took a photo of the screen with my phone, intending to keep it as evidence. As I captured the intimate messages exchanged between Ben and Lottie, tears began to flow uncontrollably. I had loved Ben and trusted Lottie. Could it be that the two people I cherished were betraying me behind my back? I wondered how devastated Amy would be if she found out her father was deceiving our family. As I wiped away my tears, a mix of sadness and anger, I hurried to put Ben's wallet and phone back in place before he returned from the bath. In that moment, something fell out of the cover. Picking it up from the floor, I realized it was a credit card. Staring at the card, the full extent of the betrayal became clear. My momentary sadness was replaced by a surge of anger. "Is the trip with your coworkers?" I asked. "Yeah, it's a 2-day trip down south," Ben replied. "Just a little break from work." "Oh, I see," I said, though I knew the truth. His trip was actually a secret getaway with Lottie. After discovering their affair, I had taken the opportunity to check Ben's phone and capture the evidence, including photos of their messages. "All right, I'll cover the trip expenses," I said, concealing my awareness. I offered to cover the trip expenses, but Ben just laughed and waved his hand. "No need, I can handle it with my allowance," he said, trying to mask his guilt and reassure me. However, I was skeptical. How could he afford a trip on his modest allowance, especially when he was frequently dining out with Lottie? His explanation seemed dubious. He quickly stumbled over his words, coming up with hasty excuses. "Well, my boss always covers dinner," he said. "Oh, how generous of him," I replied with a smile. "By the way, I'll be out late tonight too. I've arranged for Amy to stay with her grandparents after school." My parents' house was conveniently located between Amy's school and our home, and they always enjoyed having her. "Got it. I'll assume you'll pick up Amy. Enjoy your time at your parents' place," he said, perhaps thinking it would be easier to carry on with his deceit if I wasn't around, and left looking satisfied. However, I had no errands planned. After finishing work, I decided to go to Ben's office. On the way, I called my parents' house to check on Amy. Then, I stopped by a nearby cafe, choosing the seat where I could see the company's entrance. Eventually, Ben left work on time and headed in the opposite direction of our home. I followed him discreetly. The affair with Lottie was nearly confirmed by the messages, so there was no need to catch them in the act. However, I still needed concrete evidence for the divorce. By then, I had already decided in my heart to end my marriage with Ben. I felt it was impossible to continue living with him, and I could no longer see him as Amy's father. Unaware that he was being followed, Ben met Lottie at the station. They walked hand in hand, smiling broadly. At one point, Lottie's high heel got stuck in a crack in the sidewalk and broke. The two of them quickly went into a nearby shoe store, where it appeared that Ben offered to buy her a new pair of high heels. From my hiding spot, I watched as they selected shoes. When it came time to pay, Ben pulled out a card from his phone case and used it at the terminal. To my shock, the card he used was mine. I used to cover all our daily expenses with that card, but recently I had switched to QR code payments, so the card had been sitting in my bag unused. Ben must have secretly taken it, as it was a contactless card that didn't require a PayPang, and I hadn't reviewed the statements because I wasn't using it. The charges appeared on our joint account, but since they were small and mixed in with other transactions, I hadn't noticed. I also admit I should have kept better track of the card. Despite Ben's reduced extravagance since our marriage, this discovery turned my suspicions into certainty and completed my plan. I had feared it would be challenging to confirm at a restaurant, but I obtained the evidence more swiftly than I expected, almost as if fate was on my side. With this proof, I had everything I needed. I went to my parents' house to pick up Amy. "I'm going to show those who made a fool of me just what they're missing," I thought with a determined smile. After making sure Ben had left, I called out loudly for Amy. "Amy, we're moving." Amy sprang out of her room, her excitement palpable. "Yay, "A new house, Mom. Are you ready to move?" She grinned and flashed a peace sign. "Of course, everything's packed away in the closet, just like you said." When I went to pick up Amy, I shared the news of Ben's affair and the unauthorized use of my credit card with my parents. They were outraged and insisted that I should get a divorce. But my primary concern was Amy's reaction to the surprise. To my surprise, she remained incredibly calm and said, "I already knew, having learned about Ben's affair earlier." I had been trying to maintain a facade of normalcy for our family, but Amy had picked up on the tension. "Mom, you always look sad," she said, her perceptiveness striking me. She understood that her father was causing me pain and added, "We don't need a father like that." I hugged her tightly, tears streaming down my face, and whispered, "I'm sorry." I then shared my plans for revenge with my parents and Amy. They all agreed to support me, and my parents promised to back me in any way they could. Relieved, I proceeded to buy a newly built house on a mortgage, which was manageable thanks to my savings and a significant down payment. I had been secretly planning the move to coincide with Ben and Lottie's trip. "Cheer up, Dada," Amy said with a cheerful tone, and I raised my hand in agreement. "Now for the final step," I said as I picked up my phone to make a call while unpacking in the new house and having dinner with Amy. Ben's call came in shortly after. He sounded anxious and asked if he could use a money transfer app. I feigned ignorance and asked if he meant QR code payments. He explained that he had overspent and needed to download the app before the movers arrived. Earlier, I had reported my credit card as missing to customer support and requested a temporary suspension due to potential theft. This had immediately disabled the card, leaving Ben, who relied on it, in a difficult situation. Having already exhausted his allowance, he had no choice but to ask me for help. I couldn't hold back my laughter, and after a hearty laugh, I finally revealed the truth to Ben. "I'm not transferring any money. You shouldn't have gone on a cheating trip with Lottie," I said firmly. Ben was stunned into silence on the other end of the line. "I know you've been using my card without permission. I've already contacted the card company to stop it," I continued. After a pause, he muttered a quiet apology. "Do you really think sorry will fix this? What you did is theft, a crime. Both Amy and I are deeply hurt. How can you ever make amends for this?" My anger was palpable, but I replied calmly, "I can't forgive you. You've not only betrayed me, but also hurt Amy. I might have been able to find some measure of forgiveness if I were the only one affected, but involving her makes it impossible. I'm going to divorce you, and I'll ensure you're held responsible for alimony and child support for the distress you've caused." At Ben's attempt to make excuses, claiming it would be upsetting for Amy if we divorced, I responded firmly, "Didn't you hear? Amy is disappointed in you too. She doesn't need a father who cheats and uses his wife's credit card. She has every right to be let down by someone who acts like that. You should be grateful you haven't been reported to the police for theft. But to Lottie, I've already sent your belongings to her house." We had packed up not just to facilitate our move to the new house, but also to sort out Ben's things. While he was away, we organized our belongings for the new house and sent his things to Lottie's place. They should have arrived by now. The package was addressed to Lottie's husband, who will likely be confused and may discover the affair while trying to figure out the situation. It sounded like Ben handed the phone to Lottie, and I could hear her angry voice on the other end. "Wait a minute, Mary. What's going on?" I replied calmly, "You already know the situation. I've been betrayed by someone I trusted." Lottie immediately began making excuses. "I was pressured into this. Your husband said he'd manage the money issues if I agreed to be with him." Despite her attempts to play the victim, Lottie was just as culpable for the affair, especially given that she is married herself. There was no point in continuing the conversation. Lottie's voice continued to rise, but I firmly hung up and turned off my phone. Afterwards, I hired a lawyer and, at the appropriate time, filed for divorce, requesting alimony for mental distress and child support from Ben. I also pursued a similar claim against Lottie. When the lawyer contacted Ben, he was alone in an empty house. The belongings I had sent to Lottie's house had been discarded by her furious husband, who had discovered the affair and the identity of the other man. Enraged, he decided to divorce Lottie. Later, I received a polite apology from Lottie's ex-husband. He informed me that Lottie, having been expelled from her home, was also rejected by her own family once they learned the true reason for her divorce. Lottie is now working relentlessly, juggling a day job as a building cleaner, and a night shift at a convenience store to cover my alimony and her living expenses. Meanwhile, Ben has been trying to see Amy, but I've been ignoring his requests. His loneliness has led him to fall back into his old habit of overspending, and he's now burdened with debt from his extravagant purchases. If he truly cared about Amy, he wouldn't have made such reckless choices. We're enjoying a peaceful life in our new home, eagerly anticipating Amy's future. Hurry up, Mom. Today, on Amy's suggestion, we're heading to a local store for a cat adoption event. A new furry friend will surely bring even more joy to our lives.